You and your wife can pack your things and be out of my house by the end of the day, I yelled at the top of my lungs, my voice cracking but staying firm. My son Damon looked at me like I'd just said the most ridiculous thing in the world. Tiffany, my daughter-in-law, let out a laugh so cruel I felt every hair on my body stand on end. She walked over to Damon, stroked his arm with that hand covered in rings bought with my money, and said with a poisonous smile, "Don't worry, honey. Remember how it went last time. A few slaps, and she'll be back to paying for everything." Welcome to Betty's Stories. I share new life stories here every day, and I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now, let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you'll love it if you keep listening till the end. My stomach twisted into a knot. Damon smiled back, that knowing, complicit smile that broke my soul into 1,000 pieces. They took my car keys without asking and left to eat at the most expensive restaurant in the city, charging it to my credit card, of course. I watched them drive away, laughing and mocking me, certain that I would give in, just like always. But as I closed the door, I took out my cell phone with trembling hands and dialed the number I had kept secret for weeks. "Elias," I said to my younger brother, my voice steady, "it's time. Do everything we planned." I waited patiently for the appointed time of their return. When they came back that night, drunk and arrogant, they regretted the day they were born. But let me explain how a 65-year-old black woman ends up being assaulted and humiliated by her own son in her own home. My name is Grace Holloway, and this is the story of how I took back my life from hell. The descent into hell. 3 years ago, I became a widow. Robert, my husband of 42 years, died of a massive heart attack on a Sunday morning while watering the garden plants. 42 years of marriage over in a second. He left me this house, a decent Social Security income of $800 a month, and some savings we had put aside for our retirement. I thought I could finally rest, travel a little, and enjoy my golden years. How naive I was. 2 months after the funeral, Damon showed up at my door with Tiffany and 2 suitcases. "Mom, we had some issues with the apartment," he said, flashing that innocent face he always put on when he needed something. "It'll only be 2 months, I promise, just until we find something better." With my heart still broken from losing Robert, I opened the door and let them in. Those 2 months turned into a 2-year nightmare. At first, things seemed normal. Damon went out looking for work. Tiffany helped a little around the house. But slowly, like a silent sickness, the respect evaporated. First, they stopped helping with the cleaning. Then they started coming home late without warning. After that, they began asking for loans they never repaid, and finally, they simply took total control of my life. My routine became a never-ending nightmare. I woke up at 5 in the morning to prepare breakfast because Tiffany couldn't tolerate noise before 11. I cleaned the entire house in silence while they slept until noon. I washed their clothes, ironed Damon's shirts, and mopped the floors they purposely dirtied. Damon stopped looking for work 8 months ago. He just stayed on the sofa watching TV or playing video games on his phone. Tiffany went shopping with my credit cards, coming back with bags full of expensive clothes, designer shoes, and imported makeup. I was still wearing the same worn-out clothes from 5 years ago. Meals were another torment. I had to cook 3 different dishes because Tiffany was allergic to everything. Nothing was ever good enough. The soup was too salty, the rice too dry, the meat too tough. Damon ate in silence, never once defending me. I ended up eating the leftovers standing in the kitchen after they retreated to the living room to watch movies, the room that used to be my peaceful space. The money disappeared fast. My $800 pension vanished in the first week of the month. Tiffany used my credit card as if it were hers, expensive restaurants, designer clothes, and nights out with friends. Damon sold Robert's gold watch without asking me, claiming he needed to pay an urgent debt. A lie. He gambled it all away on online games. I found hidden bank statements showing transfers to virtual casinos. When I confronted him, he yelled at me to mind my own business. I had to start sewing clothes for the neighbors, doing alterations and embroidery until late at night just to earn some extra money. My arthritic hands hurt terribly, but I needed the cash. The debt piled up. The credit card reached $47,000. $47,000 that I hadn't spent, consumed by two parasites living in my home without paying a cent. Tiffany constantly mocked me. "You look like a slave in your own house," she'd say while painting her nails at my dining room table. "A pathetic old woman who doesn't know how to set boundaries." Damon would laugh. My own son laughed at the humiliations his wife inflicted on me. When I asked them to at least pick up their dirty plates, Tiffany would look at me with contempt and say, "That's what you're for, sweetie. We don't have time for that stuff." The neighbors started noticing. Estelle Johnson, my neighbor of 30 years, would see me taking out the trash with bruises on my arms. She'd ask if I was okay. I'd lie and smile, saying I'd bumped into the door. But Estelle wasn't fooled. She saw Tiffany yelling at me from the window and Damon treating me like hired help. The breaking point. The day everything changed was 3 months ago. The credit card statement arrived with a $1,200 charge at a single fine dining restaurant. I was living on $30 a week for food. I walked into the living room, the statement trembling in my hands. Tiffany was sprawled on the sofa that Robert and I bought for our 20th anniversary, wearing an emerald green dress I'd never seen before, surely another gift she bought herself with my money. Damon was playing on his phone, not paying attention. "We need to talk about this," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, showing them the restaurant charge. Tiffany didn't even look up. "Oh, that was for my birthday. I invited some friends. Got a problem?" Her tone was pure contempt, as if I were a little child interrupting an adult conversation. $1,200, Tiffany? That's more than I spend on groceries in a whole month. I can't keep paying for your whims. This debt is impossible to pay off. She finally looked at me, her eyes narrowed with something I can only describe as pure hatred. She got up from the sofa with slow, deliberate movements, like a predator approaching its prey. "My whims, my whims." Her voice rose in volume with every word. "We're doing you a favor living here. This house was dead before we got here. You were dead, a bitter old woman crying over a husband who didn't even remember you in his last years." The blow landed before I could react. Her hand struck my left cheek with such force that I lost my balance and fell onto the coffee table. The pain was intense, but the humiliation was worse. Even worse was seeing Damon get up. For a second, I thought he would finally defend his mother, but instead, he grabbed both my arms, squeezing hard, his fingers digging into my wrinkled skin. "Listen to me, Mom," he said, in a voice I didn't recognize, cold and calculating. "You are going to keep supporting us. You are going to keep paying for everything we need, and you are going to keep your mouth shut. Got it?" He shook me hard. "Got it?" I nodded. What else could I do? I was 65 with arthritis in my knees and a weak heart since Robert's death. They were young, strong, and violent. Tiffany knelt down to my level, her face inches from mine. "The next time you question us, it will be worse, much worse." She spat the words out like venom. They left that night to celebrate with friends, leaving me crumpled on the living room floor, holding my swollen cheek, crying in silence. I crawled to my room and locked the door. I spent the entire night awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling my life fall apart. The next morning, I acted as if nothing had happened. I prepared breakfast, cleaned the house, and washed their clothes. Tiffany gave me a falsely sweet smile during breakfast. "Good morning, sweetie. You look nice today." Damon said nothing, just ate his scrambled eggs in silence. The bruise on my face was visible. I covered it with old, mismatched makeup. When Estelle knocked on the door that afternoon for our usual Thursday coffee, I made an excuse. I couldn't let her see me like that. 2 weeks passed, 2 weeks of walking in silence through my own home, serving meals and keeping my eyes down, cleaning bathrooms they deliberately dirtied. Tiffany started bringing friends over. They laughed loudly, drank expensive wine, and left the living room a mess. One of her friends spilled red wine on the antique Persian rug Robert had given me for our first anniversary. When I tried to clean it right away, Tiffany shoved me. "Leave it. You'll clean it later. Don't interrupt our party." The humiliations became part of the daily routine. Tiffany called me the maid in front of her friends. Damon made jokes about my age, my body, and my uselessness. "My mom was pretty when she was young, but look at what she turned into," he'd say, pointing at me while I collected their dirty dishes. His friends laughed. I swallowed my tears and kept working. The money continued to disappear at a terrifying speed. Tiffany bought a designer handbag that cost $3,000. Damon paid $200 a month for a premium video game streaming service. My savings, which Robert and I had put together over decades of hard work, vanished. I had to sell some jewelry my mother had inherited to me: antique rings, a pearl necklace, and gold earrings. I sold them at a pawn shop for a fraction of their real value. With that money, I paid the electricity bill that was about to be shut off. One night, 2 months ago, I heard Tiffany and Damon talking in their room. My room is next to theirs, and the walls are thin. "How long do you think the old woman will last?" Tiffany asked, laughing. "I don't know, but we'll squeeze her dry while she does. When she dies, the house is mine by law. I'm her only son," Damon replied. "What if she tries to kick us out sooner?" Tiffany sounded worried. "She won't dare. You saw what happened last time. A couple of hits, and she's obedient again. She's weak. She always has been." They both laughed. They laughed, imagining my death, planning how to steal every last cent from me. That night, something broke inside me. It wasn't just my heart. It was something deeper. It was my fear. I was lying in the dark, listening to their cruel laughter through the wall, and suddenly I felt something I hadn't felt in months: rage. Pure, burning, powerful rage. I wasn't going to die a victim. I wasn't going to let these parasites keep everything Robert and I built. I wasn't going to let my son become my slow killer. The plan. The next morning, while they slept in late as always, I found a number in my old address book that I hadn't called in years. Elias, my younger brother. We had grown distant after a stupid family fight 5 years ago, stupid pride on both sides. But Elias had always been protective of me when we were kids. With trembling hands, I dialed his number. It rang 3 times before he answered. "Grace?" His voice sounded surprised. "Elias," I said, my voice cracking. "I need help. I desperately need your help." I told Elias everything, every strike, every humiliation, every stolen penny. I spoke for nearly an hour, crying, unloading 2 years of accumulated pain. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. I thought he had hung up, but then I heard his voice, loaded with a contained fury that made me feel like I wasn't completely alone. "Grace, I'm coming right now." "No, wait, we need to do this right. We need a plan. I know someone who can help us. A lawyer who specializes in elder abuse cases. His name is Andrew Sterling. He was a colleague of mine at the bank. He's the best at what he does." 3 days later, Elias came to the city without Damon and Tiffany knowing. He met me at a coffee shop 3 blocks from my house. I had to invent an excuse about going to the supermarket. Tiffany didn't even look up from her phone when I left. When I saw my brother after 5 years, I almost collapsed. He had aged, more gray hair and wrinkles around his eyes, but his embrace was strong and protective, making me feel safe for the first time in months. "Forgive me for not being here," he whispered in my ear, "but we're going to fix this now, I promise you." Andrew "Andy" Sterling was with him, a man in his 50s with thick glasses and a serious but kind look. He carried a worn leather briefcase full of documents. He sat across from me and took out a small recorder. "Grace, I need you to tell me everything again, but this time with specific details, dates, amounts, witnesses, everything you can remember." For 2 hours, I recounted my hell. Andrew took rapid notes, asking precise questions. "Do you have the bank statements? Did you photograph the bruises? Is there anyone who witnessed the abuse?" "My neighbor Estelle," I said immediately. "She's seen a lot of things. She's asked me several times if I was okay." Andrew nodded with satisfaction. "Perfect. We'll need her testimony. Look, Grace, what they're doing to you is called financial exploitation and elder abuse. In this country, that's a serious felony. We're talking about possible prison time." My heart skipped a beat. Prison? But he's my son. Andrew looked at me with compassion, but also firmness. Your son is stealing from you, hitting you, and threatening you. It's not love. It's a crime. He explained the plan. I needed to gather evidence over the next 2 weeks. Photographs of any new bruises, screenshots of the bank statements showing all the unauthorized charges, and recordings of conversations where they threatened or humiliated me. I know it sounds terrifying, Andrew said, but it's the only way to protect you legally. Without solid evidence, this turns into your word against theirs. He handed me a new, small, discreet cell phone. This one has a permanently activated recording application. Just press the side button and record everything. Keep the phone in your apron pocket. They won't notice it. He also gave me legal documents, including an eviction order we could present to the judge, a temporary restraining order, and a lawsuit for financial fraud and elder abuse. When we have everything ready, Andrew explained, we'll activate everything at once, like a legal tsunami. We won't give them time to react or counterattack. Elias squeezed my hand over the table. I'll be here. I'll stay in a nearby hotel. We'll meet every 3 days to review the evidence. You just have to hold out a little longer, sister. Just a little longer. I returned home with the grocery bags and the new phone hidden in my bra. Tiffany was furious. You took 3 hours. Where were you? Who were you talking to? She inspected the bags suspiciously. The supermarket had a long line on Saturday. I lied, trying to sound calm. And I ran into a neighbor. Tiffany shoved me against the wall. Don't lie to me, you stupid old woman. I know you. I know when you're lying. Damon appeared behind her. Mom, you better not be planning anything foolish, because you know what happens when you disobey us. That night, with the phone hidden in my robe pocket, I recorded an entire conversation where Tiffany forced me to wash her hair at 11 o'clock because she had an appointment the next day. Scrub harder, you worthless cow, see? This is all you're good for. You can't even do this right. Damon yelled from the living room, demanding beer. Mom, bring me a cold beer. Hurry up! When I brought him the beer, he snatched the bottle from my hands. Took you too long. It's practically warm. You're totally useless. The recording captured everything. Over the next few days, I photographed everything. Bank statements showing $6,000 in charges at a jewelry store, a $2,000 charge at a luxury spa, and another $100 on athletic wear that Damon would never use because he never worked out. I photographed the nearly empty pantry and found receipts for exclusive restaurant meals costing $800 each. I documented my own fridge, an expired yogurt, half a package of ham, and 2 eggs. That was all I had to eat while they feasted on lobster and champagne. Estelle finally managed to talk to me one afternoon when Tiffany and Damon went out. She knocked on my door with a worried expression. Grace, I need to talk to you. I can't keep quiet. I quickly let her in. I've seen everything, she said with tears in her eyes. The shouting, how they treat you, how you look like a zombie taking out the trash. Last night, I heard Tiffany screaming that you were a worthless burden. The walls are thin. I've heard hitting. I've seen bruises on your arms. She took my hands in hers. Tell me what I can do to help you, please. I told her about Andrew and the plan. Estelle didn't hesitate for a second. I'll testify. I'll declare everything I've seen and heard. I have dates written down in my calendar. I've been mentally documenting every instance of abuse, because I knew you would need help someday. She hugged me tight. No one deserves this, especially not you, the sweetest woman I know. That afternoon, Estelle spoke with Andrew on the phone, and they agreed on a formal statement. An eyewitness. That enormously strengthened the case. The showdown. The straw that broke the camel's back came a week later. Tiffany threw a party in my house without asking. She invited 20 people. 20 strangers filled my living room, my kitchen, and my backyard. They drank, smoked, and played music at a deafening volume until 4 a.m. They broke an antique lamp and burned the entryway rug with a cigarette. When I tried to ask them to turn down the volume because the neighbors were complaining, Tiffany grabbed my arm so hard that it left red bracelet-like marks. Shut up and go to your room. This is my house now. You only live here because I let you. Damon was drunk. dancing with a woman who wasn't his wife. When I confronted him, he shoved me. "Get lost, you bitter old woman. Always ruining everything." I fell onto the sofa. No one helped me. Everyone laughed. I went to my room, locked the door, and called Elias, crying. "That's enough," I said. "I can't take any more. I want them out tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Elias said firmly on the other end of the phone. "Tomorrow, we end this. We have everything we need." Andrew reviewed the evidence and says the case is rock solid. Damon and Tiffany are going to learn what it means to face real justice. That night, I couldn't sleep. I listened to the party downstairs, the laughter, the music, the yelling. My house sounded like a trashy bar. At 5 a.m, everyone finally left. I heard Tiffany and Damon stumble up the stairs, laughing, not caring that I was awake, frightened, and humiliated in my own room. At 9 a.m, I got up. They were still sleeping, of course. I went downstairs and saw the mess. Empty bottles everywhere, dirty dishes piled up in the kitchen, drink stains on the cream-colored walls that Robert had painted so carefully, and cigarette butts crushed in my good china plates. I felt the tears coming, but I swallowed them. No more tears. Today was the day. Today, I was taking back my life. I called Elias. "I'm ready." He answered immediately. "Give me 2 hours. Andrew is preparing the final documents. We'll be there at 11. I cleaned the house as best I could. Not for them, but for me, because this house was mine, and I wasn't going to let these parasites destroy it anymore. While mopping the living room floor, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Tiffany came down in pajamas, her hair messy, and her makeup smeared. She looked at me with contempt. "Did you clean the upstairs bathroom yet? I threw up last night, and I don't want to look at it." I didn't bother to answer. I kept mopping. That seemed to infuriate her more. "Are you ignoring me? Me, the lady of this house?" She walked over and kicked the bucket of dirty water, spilling it all over the freshly cleaned floor. "When I talk to you, you answer me, you deaf old dog." Damon appeared behind her, yawning. "What's going on here?" Tiffany pointed at the wet floor. "Your mother is having one of her rebellious days again. I think she needs to remember her place." Damon walked toward me with that expression I knew too well, the expression that preceded violence. But this time, I didn't back down. This time, I looked him directly in the eye. "Damon, Tiffany, I want you to know something. You have until the end of the day to get your things out of my house. This time, I'm serious. You can leave the easy way, or you can leave the hard way." The silence that followed was thick. Then Tiffany let out that chilling laugh. She walked up to Damon and stroked his arm with those ring-covered fingers that I had paid for. "Don't worry, honey. Remember how it went last time. A few slaps and she'll be back to paying for everything." Damon smiled, that complicit smile that broke my heart. "You're right. We've been through this before. Mom just needs a reminder." He advanced toward me with clenched fists, but I had already pressed the record button on the phone in my apron pocket. Every word, every threat, every violent gesture was being recorded. "Go ahead," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "Hit me again. Do it. Show your wife what kind of man you are, a man who hits his 65-year-old mother." Damon hesitated for a second. Just 1 second. But Tiffany shoved him from behind. "Do it! Put her in her place once and for all." Damon raised his hand, but just then the doorbell rang. Once, twice, 3 times, insistently. Tiffany frowned. "Who the heck is it this early?" The bell kept ringing. "Go open it," Damon ordered her. Tiffany walked to the door, muttering curses. She opened it abruptly, and then she went silent. From where I stood, I could see Elias at the entrance, and behind him, Andrew with his leather briefcase. And behind them, 2 uniformed police officers. "Good morning," Andrew said in a professional, cold voice. "I'm looking for Damon Holloway and Tiffany Montero. I have legal documents to serve them." Tiffany went pale. "What? Who are you?" Elias walked in without permission, pushing Tiffany aside. He saw me in the living room, saw the overturned bucket, saw Damon with his fists still clenched and his jaw tightened with fury. "Sister, are you all right?" I nodded, unable to speak. Damon recognized his uncle, and confusion crossed his face. "Uncle Elias, what are you doing here?" Andrew stepped into the center of the room and opened his briefcase with precise movements. The two police officers stood flanking the door with serious, impassive expressions. "Damon Holloway and Tiffany Montero. I am attorney Andrew Sterling. I represent Ms. Grace Holloway in a case of elder abuse, financial fraud, and domestic violence." He pulled out a thick folder full of documents. "I have substantial evidence of multiple felonies committed against my client over the last 2 years. Tiffany tried to laugh, but it sounded nervous and forced. What is this crazy old woman talking about? She made up some story. You can't believe her." Andrew completely ignored her and continued. "Evidence that includes bank statements showing unauthorized charges totaling over $47,000. Audio recordings where both of you verbally threaten and humiliate Ms. Holloway. Photographs of physical injuries documented with dates, and the testimony of eyewitnesses, specifically Ms. Estelle Johnson, a neighbor of this property, who has witnessed multiple incidents of abuse." Damon went red. "Mom, what did you do? You're reporting your own son?" His voice rose in volume. "After everything we've done for you, we kept you company. We kept you from being lonely in this huge house." Elias took a step forward, placing himself between Damon and me. "Everything you've done for her? Are you talking about stealing every dime, hitting her, turning her into your maid, and threatening her with more violence if she didn't obey?" Andrew raised a hand for silence. "I have 3 legal documents here. First, an immediate eviction order. This house is the exclusive property of Ms. Holloway, inherited from her late husband. You have no legal right to it. You have exactly 2 hours to collect your personal belongings and vacate the property." Tiffany screamed. "You can't kick us out like this. We have rights. We've lived here for 2 years." Andrew looked at her with absolute coldness. "You are not legal tenants. You never signed a lease. You never paid rent. You are illegal occupants, and Ms. Holloway has every right to expel you." "Second," Andrew continued, "I have a temporary restraining order here. Once you leave this property, you cannot approach Ms. Holloway, her home, or her frequent places within 1,500 feet for the next 5 years. Any violation of this order will result in immediate arrest." He pulled out another document. "And third, a formal lawsuit for financial fraud, elder abuse, and domestic violence. These are serious felonies that can result in prison sentences of up to 10 years. The color completely drained from Tiffany's face. Damon started trembling. "Mom, no, please don't do this. I'm your son, your only son." His voice broke. Suddenly, he was the little boy again, begging for forgiveness after breaking something. But I was no longer the mother who gave in. I was no longer the weak woman who let herself be manipulated by guilt and misunderstood love. "You stopped being my son the day you raised your hand to me," I said firmly. "The day you allowed your wife to humiliate me. The day you sold your father's things to gamble. The day you stole my dignity." One of the police officers stepped forward. He was an older man in his 50s with a serious expression. "Mr. Holloway, Ms. Montero, I strongly recommend you cooperate. The eviction order is legal and signed by a judge. Resisting will only worsen your legal situation." He took out a small notebook. "Furthermore, I have a report here from Ms. Estelle Johnson, who called 3 weeks ago, reporting disturbances and possible domestic violence at this address. That call is registered in the system. We also have a report from last night about an excessively noisy party until 4 in the morning. 12 neighbors called to complain." Tiffany tried to regain her composure, crossing her arms and lifting her chin with the arrogance she always used as a shield. "This is ridiculous. Grace is a confused old woman. She probably has dementia or something. We were taking care of her. We fed her and kept her company. We were her caretakers." Andrew let out a short, humorless laugh. "Caretakers, interesting theory. Let me show you something." He took out a phone and played one of the recordings. My own voice sounded shaky. "Tiffany, please, I need money for my heart medication." And then Tiffany's voice, crystal clear. "Your meds can wait. I need that money for the beauty parlor. You just deal with it, you whining old hag." Anyway, at your age, it doesn't matter if you die sooner or later." The silence in the room was absolute. Even Tiffany seemed to realize how damning her own words sounded. The second younger officer shook his head with an expression of disgust. "Ma'am, elder abuse is one of the most serious crimes in this state, especially when it involves financial exploitation and medical neglect." Andrew continued, "I also have this recording from 5 days ago." He pressed play again. This time, it was Damon's voice. "Mom, bring me a beer. Move it, you worthless old woman." And then the unmistakable sound of a slap, my own stifled cry, and after, Damon again. "Next time you make me wait, it'll be worse." Damon tried to approach me. "Mom, that was taken out of context. I was drunk. I didn't mean what I said. You know I love you." Elias immediately blocked him, placing himself as a physical barrier between us. "Don't you dare go near her, not one more step." His voice was dangerously low. "For 2 years, you tortured my sister. You made her your slave. You stole her money, her dignity, her peace, and now you come up with cheap excuses." Andrew looked at his watch. "It's 11:15 in the morning. You have until 1:15 to pack your personal belongings and vacate the property. We will remain here to supervise and ensure there are no incidents." Tiffany finally seemed to grasp that this was real, her eyes filled with tears of fury. "And where are we supposed to go? To the streets?" Andrew responded with absolute indifference. "That is not my client's problem. You should have thought of that before you abused her hospitality, before you stole from her, before you hit her." He pulled out another document. "By the way, I am also initiating a preemptive injunction. All items in this house that were purchased with Ms. Holloway's funds will remain on the property. That includes clothing, jewelry, electronics, and anything acquired with her credit cards or cash over the last 2 years. Tiffany became hysterical. "You can't do that. Those clothes are mine. The shoes are mine. Everything is mine." Andrew took out a green folder full of papers. "I have all of Ms. Holloway's credit card statements here. Every charge is documented with date, time, and location. That emerald green dress you're wearing, for example, was purchased on March 15th at a downtown boutique for $200, charged to Grace Holloway's American Express card. Technically, it is the property of my client." Tiffany clutched the dress as if someone were about to rip it off her at that moment. Damon tried another angle. "Mom, think about what you're doing. I'm your only family. If you do this, you'll lose me forever. Is that what you want? To die alone?" Those words would have crushed me before. Before, they would have triggered all my maternal guilt, all my fear of abandonment. But now, I felt only a cold clarity. "Damon, I was already alone. I was lonelier living with you than when Robert died. Because at least when I was truly alone, I had my dignity. I had peace in my house, and I wasn't afraid in my own home. For the last 2 years, I didn't have a son. I had an abuser living under my roof. I had someone who saw me as an ATM with legs. Someone who hit me when I didn't obey fast enough." My voice grew stronger with every word. "So don't talk to me about losing you. You lost me a long time ago. The day you decided your comfort was worth more than your mother's well-being. The day you sold your father's watch to gamble. The day you looked me in the eye and said I deserved to be hit." Tiffany tried one last strategy. She dropped onto the sofa with exaggerated drama, covering her face with her hands. "I'm pregnant," she sobbed. "I'm 3 months pregnant. Are you going to kick your grandchild out onto the street?" There was a moment of silence. Then Andrew spoke, his voice weary. "Ms. Montero, I have your recent medical history here, which you signed authorization to share during the preliminary investigation. You visited an obstetrician 2 weeks ago to renew your contraceptive prescription. There is no pregnancy." Tiffany paled, trapped in the lie. The young officer shook his head. "Ma'am, lying to emotionally manipulate a victim of abuse is further evidence of abusive behavior. You are just digging your own grave deeper." He looked at his partner. "We'll proceed with the eviction." The senior officer nodded. Mr. Holloway, Ms. Montero, start packing. You have less than 2 hours now. He turned to me with a gentler expression. Ms. Holloway, is there any area of the house where you would prefer to wait while they pack? We can ensure they don't bother you. I shook my head. I want to stay here. I want to see them leave. I need to see this through to the end. Elias put a hand on my shoulder. I'll be with you the whole time. I won't leave you alone for a second. Andrew put away his documents. The officers will supervise the packing. I will stay to ensure they only take what is legally theirs. Any attempt to take Ms. Holloway's property will be considered theft and result in immediate arrest. Damon and Tiffany went upstairs. I could hear drawers being violently yanked open and closet doors slamming shut. Tiffany was screaming obscenities. Damon was kicking things, the chaos of defeat. But downstairs in my living room, for the first time in 2 years, I felt safe. I looked at Elias. Thank you for coming, for believing me, for not judging me for taking so long. He squeezed my hand. It's never too late to take back your life. Never. Andrew sat across from me. Grace, I want you to understand something. This is only the beginning. The eviction is immediate, but the legal process to recover the stolen money and prosecute the criminal charges will take time. Months, probably. But we have a solid case. Very solid. You did an excellent job documenting everything. The aftermath. An hour passed, then an hour and a half. Finally, I heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. Damon and Tiffany came down with 4 suitcases and 2 backpacks. That was all. 2 years of living at my expense reduced to 6 pieces of luggage. Tiffany came down with her eyes red from crying, but her gaze was still full of venom. She was wearing simple gray athletic clothes that were probably also bought with my money, but Andrew had decided not to fight over every garment. I just want them gone, I had told him earlier. Damon was carrying the heavier suitcases, sweating, his jaw clenched. They dropped everything in the foyer with dry thuds that shook the floor. Happy? Tiffany spat, looking at Andrew. You're kicking us out onto the street like dogs. The young officer quickly checked the suitcases, opening each one to verify the contents. He pulled out a jewelry case. What's this? Tiffany tried to snatch it away. Those are my jewels, my gifts. The officer looked at Andrew, who checked his green folder. Pearl necklace, purchased July 23rd, $1,800. Grace Holloway's American Express card. Diamond earrings purchased September 5th, $2,300. Same card. Gold bracelet purchased December 2nd, $1,100. Same card. He looked up. It all stays. Tiffany screamed like a wounded animal. No! Those are mine! Damon gave them to me. Andrew responded in a monotone voice. Mr. Holloway has no income of his own. Everything he bought was with money stolen from his mother. Therefore, it legally belongs to Ms. Holloway. The officer emptied the entire case onto the coffee table. There was more than I remembered. Rings, bracelets, necklaces, and earrings. Thousands and thousands of dollars in jewelry that I had paid for unknowingly. I felt dizzy seeing all that ostentation bought with my suffering. The officer continued checking. He pulled out an expensive-looking man's watch. And this? Damon went red. It's mine. I bought it myself. Andrew verified his papers. Rolex Submariner, purchased April 18th, $8,500. Grace Holloway's Visa card. Damon clenched his fists, but said nothing. The watch remained on the table next to the jewelry. Then came an iPad, a new laptop, premium wireless headphones, and a camera I never saw them use. Everything bought with my money and everything confiscated. You can't do this, Tiffany muttered over and over like a desperate mantra. You can't just steal everything from us. Elias let out a bitter laugh. Steal from you? Did you hear what you just said? You are the thieves. You stole from an elderly woman for 2 full years. You bled her dry until she was bankrupt, and now you have the audacity to call yourselves victims? He stepped up to Tiffany until they were face to face. "My sister ate leftovers while you were having lobster for dinner. She wore ragged clothes while you bought designer dresses. She worked sewing until her arthritic fingers bled just to pay the debts you created. And you dare to feel robbed?" Tiffany backed away from the fury in Elias's eyes. Damon tried to intervene. "Uncle, understand. We were in a bad situation. We needed temporary help." Elias turned to him. 2 years is not temporary, and help implies gratitude, not abuse. Help doesn't mean hitting the person who helps you. It doesn't mean threatening her when she complains. It doesn't mean stealing every last dime. His voice broke slightly. "Damon, I carried you when you were a baby. I taught you how to ride a bike. I was at your graduation, and now I don't recognize you. The nephew I knew would never have raised a hand against his mother." For a moment, just a brief moment, I saw something like shame in Damon's eyes, but Tiffany touched his arm, and the moment passed. "Don't give them the pleasure of seeing you weak," she whispered. But we all heard her. Andrew shook his head. "Unbelievable. Right up until the last second, you're still manipulating him." He looked at his watch. "It's 12:50. You have 25 minutes to get out of this property, or the officers will proceed with an arrest for contempt of court." The senior officer pointed to the suitcases that had already been checked. "You can take that. Everything else stays. You have your personal clothing, some hygiene items, and personal documents. It's more than you deserve, considering the circumstances." Tiffany opened one of the suitcases and started pulling out clothes, throwing them on the floor. "Then I'm not taking anything. If I can't have what's mine, let everything rot here." Damon stopped her. "Tiffany, stop! We lost. Don't make things worse." But she was out of control. She ran toward the kitchen. We heard her violently opening cabinets. The sound of plates smashing against the floor made the 2 officers run after her. "Ma'am, stop immediately!" When we reached the kitchen, Tiffany was shattering my dishes, the ones Robert had given me for our 10th anniversary. Hand-painted ceramic plates we had bought on a trip to New Orleans. Irreplaceable, full of memories. They were in pieces on the floor. The young officer grabbed her arms. "Ms. Montero, you are under arrest for destruction of private property and disturbing the peace." He pulled out the handcuffs. Tiffany struggled. "Let go of me. You can't arrest me. I didn't do anything wrong." But the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. The officer began reading her Miranda rights. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Damon stood frozen, watching his wife being handcuffed. "Tiffany, what did you do? Why did you do that?" She screamed at him as they dragged her out of the kitchen. "Because they're stealing from us. Because your mother is a vindictive snake. Do something. Don't let them take me." But Damon didn't move. Maybe he finally understood that there was nothing to do, that the consequences of 2 years of abuse had finally caught up with them. The senior officer addressed Damon. "Mr. Holloway, your wife will be booked and will spend at least 24 hours in custody until her bail hearing. I strongly recommend you take your belongings and leave this property now. Don't make me arrest you too." Damon nodded like an automaton. He collected the suitcases from the foyer. "Where do I go?" he asked no one in particular, his voice broken. No one answered. That was no longer our problem. He carried the suitcases out the door. Before leaving, he turned to look at me one last time. "Mom, I'm sorry. I really am sorry." But his words sounded hollow. Too late, too little, too false. "Goodbye, Damon." That was all I said. Not son, not my love, just his name, because that was all that was left between us. A name and 35 years of shattered history. I watched them take Tiffany away in handcuffs toward the patrol car. She was screaming obscenities, threats, and curses. The neighbors had come out to watch the spectacle. Estelle was on her porch, tears rolling down her cheeks, but also a smile of relief. She waved at me. I waved back. Damon loaded the suitcases into his car, the car I had helped him pay for 3 years ago. He drove off without looking back. The patrol car with Tiffany inside followed, its lights on but no siren. Just like that, after 2 years of hell, they were gone. The house fell silent, a beautiful, peaceful, liberating silence. Elias closed the front door and locked it. He turned to me, his eyes shining with contained tears. "They're gone, sister. They're finally gone." I broke down. 2 years of forced strength, swallowed fear, and held back tears all came out at once. I cried in my brother's arms like a little girl. I cried with relief, pain, and liberation. Andrew gave us that private moment. He approached afterward with a box of tissues. "Grace, I know this was very hard, but you did the right thing. The bravest thing you can do is defend yourself, especially when the abuser is family." His phone rang. He answered briefly and hung up. "Good news. Tiffany will be formally charged with destruction of property. That's in addition to the other charges. Her bail will be high, very high." "And Damon?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "What will happen to him?" Andrew sighed. "That depends. If he cooperates with the investigation, if he returns what he can, if he shows genuine remorse, perhaps the judge will be more lenient. But he will still face consequences. Financial abuse against the elderly is a federal crime in certain cases. We're talking about potentially $47,000 stolen. That's not small potatoes." He put away his documents in the briefcase. "For now, rest. Change the locks tomorrow, install security cameras, and document any attempt at contact. The next few months will be a process, but you've passed the hardest part." Rebuilding a life. That night, I slept in my own house for the first time in 2 years, without being afraid, without hearing threatening footsteps in the hall, without expecting someone to knock on my door at any moment, demanding something, without having to pretend to be asleep to avoid confrontations. The silence was so profound that it almost scared me. I had become so used to the constant noise, the yelling voices, the loud music, and the nightly fights. Now I only heard the wall clock in the living room, the same one Robert had hung 30 years ago. Its constant tick-tock lulled me like a lullaby. Elias stayed in the guest room that night. He insisted on not leaving me alone yet. "Just for a few days," he said, "until you feel safe." I was grateful. At 3 a.m, I woke up from a nightmare where Tiffany entered my room with a knife. I got up, sweating, my heart pounding. I walked through the house, checking that all the doors were locked and all the windows were secure. Fear doesn't disappear overnight, even when the monsters are gone. The next morning, Elias called a locksmith. At 9 o'clock sharp, an older man arrived with his toolbox. "Problems with tenants?" he asked while inspecting the main lock. Elias nodded. "Something like that." In 2 hours, he had changed all the locks, the front door, the back door, and the garage door. 3 new sets of keys. He handed me one. "These are yours, ma'am. No one else has them. No one else can enter without your permission." I held the keys in my hand as if they were gold bars, the keys to my freedom. Estelle came to visit that afternoon with a homemade chocolate cake. "I wanted to celebrate," she said with a smile as she entered the kitchen. She saw the broken plates that I still hadn't picked up from the floor. Her smile faded. "Oh, Grace." She knelt down and started picking up the pieces with me. "These were your favorites, weren't they? The ones from New Orleans." I nodded, unable to speak. Estelle hugged a large piece of the plate that had a yellow flower painted on it. "I'm so sorry, but they're just things. You're okay. That's what matters." We sat down to have coffee and cake. Estelle told me that other neighbors had also noticed the abuse, but didn't know how to help. Mrs. Amalia at number 42 said she once saw you with a black eye. She wanted to ask you, but Tiffany was with you and rushed you into the house. I shook my head. I remember that day. I told everyone I fell in the bathroom, but the truth is, Damon shoved me against the vanity because dinner wasn't ready when he wanted it. "Why didn't you tell us?" Estelle asked, tears in her eyes. "We would have done something. The police, social services, something." I took her wrinkled hand in mine. "Because I was ashamed. Because he was my son. Because I thought if I was a better mother, if I cooked better, if I cleaned faster, if I didn't complain so much, then everything would improve. Because they made me believe I was the problem." My voice broke. "And because I was afraid. So Afraid. Tiffany threatened to burn me with boiling oil once if I told anyone. Damon said if I called the police, he would put me in a nursing home where they would let me die alone. Estelle wept openly. Those monsters, those damned monsters. We hugged in the kitchen, two older women crying over the pain of abuse and the relief of freedom. After a while, Estelle wiped her eyes. Well, it's over. They're gone. And I'm going to be here every day checking that you're all right. If you see anything suspicious, if you get weird calls, if they come near you again, you call me immediately. Promise? I promised. The next few days were strange. I woke up early out of habit, ready to make breakfast for 3 people, and then I remembered I was alone. Just me. No one would scream at me if the coffee wasn't hot enough. No one would throw eggs on the floor because they were overcooked. No one would call me useless for not guessing exactly what they wanted to eat. I cooked only for myself, small portions, the things I liked. I made chamomile tea and sat in the garden to drink it peacefully, something I hadn't been able to do in 2 years. Andrew called daily to update the case. Tiffany is still in custody. Her bail was set at $50,000. No one has paid it yet. Damon is apparently living with a friend but doesn't have the money for his wife's bail. He paused. Grace, I have to warn you about something. Tiffany is furious, very furious. She's claiming you set them up, that you manipulated them, and that the whole thing was a plan to keep their things. The classic victim narrative of an abuser when confronted. Should I be worried? I asked, feeling fear crawl back up my spine. You are legally protected, Andrew assured me. The restraining order is solid, and while she's in custody, she can't do anything. When she gets out, if she makes bail, any approach will result in immediate arrest. But yes, stay alert. Install the cameras I recommended. Don't open the door to strangers, and keep my number on speed dial. The next day, a technician arrived to install security cameras. 4 exterior cameras covering all angles of the house, 2 interior ones in the living room and kitchen, and a doorbell with a camera at the front door. Any movement and you'll get an alert, the technician explained. You can see everything in real time from anywhere. He showed me how the app worked. Seeing my own house from my phone felt like magic, but necessary magic. A week after the eviction, I got the first call. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me do it. Hello? Silence, then heavy breathing. Mom? It was Damon. His voice sounded broken and desperate. Mom, please, I need to talk to you. I was about to hang up, but Andrew had told me to document everything. Damon, you have a restraining order. You shouldn't be calling me. I recorded the conversation as he had taught me. I know, but I need money. Tiffany is still in jail. The bail is too high. I don't have anywhere to live. The friend I was staying with kicked me out because I can't pay rent. Mom, please, just a small loan, $2,000. I'll pay you back, I promise. His voice became more urgent, more desperate. Please, I can't keep living like this. I'm sleeping in the car. I haven't eaten well in days. I felt the familiar guilt try to grab hold of me, the voice in my head saying he was my son, he was suffering, and it was my responsibility to help him. But then I remembered the slaps, the insults, the threats, the constant fear, and the $47,000 stolen. Damon, I can't help you. You violated the restraining order by calling me. This conversation is being recorded and will be given to my lawyer. Don't contact me again. My voice trembled but remained firm. Seriously, Mom? Are you really going to leave me on the street? I'm your son, your only family. Now his voice turned threatening, the tone I knew too well. You're going to regret this. Tiffany and I are going to get back what is ours. That house should be mine. Everything should be mine. Dad would have wanted me to have it. He breathed heavily. This is not over. I hung up with trembling hands. I immediately called Andrew and sent him the recording. Perfect, he said. You just gave me more ammunition. Implicit threat and restraining order violation. I'm going to request that he be arrested and that the restraining order be increased to absolute zero contact, including intermediaries. It was reassuring, but terrifying at the same time. My own son threatening me. How had it come to this? 2 days later, Andrew called me with news. Damon was arrested this morning. The restraining order violation, plus the implicit threat. He's in custody with Tiffany. His hearing is in 3 days. He paused. Grace, I have to ask you something important. The district attorney is ready to proceed with all charges: fraud, elder abuse, extortion, threats, domestic violence. We're talking about years in prison potentially, but you are the victim. You have the right to weigh in on how to proceed. Do you want to move forward with everything? The question weighed on my chest like a stone. Did I want my son to go to prison? The mother in me screamed no, but the woman who had survived 2 years of abuse knew the answer. Yes, I said finally. I want to move forward because if there are no real consequences, they will do this again. If not to me, to someone else. Tiffany will find another victim. Damon will learn he can get away with it. There has to be justice. The verdict. The hearing was 3 days later at the downtown courthouse. Andrew picked me up early in the morning. Elias came from his city to accompany me. You don't have to face him alone, he said as he helped me into the car. Estelle also insisted on coming. I'm an official witness in the case, and you're my friend. I'm going to be there. We arrived at the courthouse an hour early. The building was imposing, with large columns and marble hallways that echoed with every step. I felt small in such a formal place. Andrew took me to a private waiting room for victims. You won't have to see them until we enter the judge's chambers, he explained. And when you're in there, I'll be by your side at all times. He reviewed his documents one last time. He had 3 thick folders full of evidence: bank statements, photographs, transcribed recordings, testimonies from Estelle and other neighbors, and medical reports from my visits to the doctor for stress and anxiety. We have such a solid case that the DA is considering this a model case for future legislation on elder protection. When we were finally called into the chamber, I felt my legs shaking so much that I could barely walk. Elias held one arm, and Estelle held the other. We entered, and I saw the room. The judge was already seated on his high bench, a man in his 60s with a serious expression. The prosecutor, a young woman in a black suit, was organizing documents at her table, and on the other side, handcuffed and in orange jail uniforms, were Damon and Tiffany with their public defender. Seeing them like that shocked me. Damon had lost weight. He had deep dark circles under his eyes and a grown beard. Tiffany looked haggard, without makeup, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. For a second, I felt pity. But then Tiffany saw me, and her expression transformed into pure hatred. She looked at me with eyes so full of venom that I had to look away. Damon just looked at the floor, unable to face me. The judge struck his gavel. Bail hearing for defendants Damon Holloway and Tiffany Montero. Multiple charges, including financial fraud against an elderly person, domestic abuse, violence, threats, violation of a restraining order, and destruction of property. The state versus Holloway and Montero. Prosecutor, proceed. The prosecutor stood up confidently. Your Honor, the state requests that bail be denied for both defendants. We have substantial evidence demonstrating not only the crimes committed, but also the intent to continue the harassment and possible violence against the victim. She began presenting the evidence. She projected the bank statements onto a large screen with red markers highlighting the fraudulent charges, over $47,000 in total. Then she showed photographs of my bruises, dated and with medical descriptions. The images were brutal. I was surprised myself to see them all together. I didn't remember having so many injuries. The brain blocks trauma to protect itself, but there it all was, documented in images that didn't lie. Then she played fragments of the audio recordings. Tiffany's voice, calling me a worthless old woman who deserved to die alone, resonated throughout the chamber. Damon's voice, threatening to put me in a nursing home where they would let me rot. Tiffany laughing while ordering me to clean up her vomit, the cruel laughter as they planned my death to take the house. The judge frowned more deeply with each recording. Some members of the public who had come to watch other hearings shook their heads with expressions of disgust. The prosecutor continued. Furthermore, Your Honor, After the initial restraining order, the defendant Damon Holloway called the victim, violating the order. In that recorded call, he implicitly threatened to recover the property by force. I quote verbatim, "Tiffany and I are going to get back what is ours. You're going to regret this. This is not over." The judge looked at Damon with a severe expression. "Is that quote correct, Mr. Holloway?" Damon nodded almost imperceptibly. The public defender, a young man who had clearly been assigned by the state because they couldn't afford a private one, stood up. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges that he made mistakes, but we must consider that Ms. Holloway is his mother. There are complex family ties. My client was going through severe financial difficulties and—" The judge interrupted him. "Counselor, are you suggesting that financial difficulties justify the abuse and theft of a 65-year-old woman? Are you saying that family ties are a license for violence?" The lawyer paled. "No, Your Honor. I just want to establish context." "The context I see," the judge said in a hard voice, "is 2 years of systematic abuse. We are not talking about an isolated incident. This is not a family fight that got out of control. This was premeditated, sustained, and cruel." He looked directly at Damon and Tiffany. "You turned this woman's home into a prison. You turned her into your slave. You stole her money, her dignity, and her peace. And when she finally mustered the courage to defend herself, you threatened her with more violence." The prosecutor added another point. "Your Honor, we also present the testimony of Ms. Estelle Johnson, the victim's neighbor for 20 years. Estelle stood up when she was called to the stand. She was sworn in and began to testify. In a clear, firm voice, she described everything she had seen and heard. "I saw that young woman," she said, pointing to Tiffany, "shove Grace against the car at least 3 times. I heard her scream horrible things through the open windows. I once saw Grace taking out the trash with a swollen face and bruises on both arms. When I asked if she was okay, Tiffany came out of the house and practically dragged Grace back inside." "I heard the hitting," Estelle continued, tears rolling down her cheeks. "The walls are not that thick. I heard when Damon yelled at her. I heard plates breaking. I heard Grace crying at night. I called the police twice for disturbances, but when they arrived, Grace was so afraid she said everything was fine." The judge took notes meticulously. Tiffany tried to interrupt. "That old woman is lying. She never—" The judge struck the gavel hard. "Silence. One more interruption, and I will have you removed from this chamber." The public defender tried another strategy in his turn. "Ms. Johnson, is it true that you and Ms. Holloway are close friends?" Estelle nodded. "We've been friends for 20 years. The lawyer smiled as if he had won a point. "Then your testimony might be biased in favor of your friend." Estelle glared at him. "Young man, I'm 72 years old. I've raised 5 children. I saw abuse in my own family when I was a child. I know it when I see it. And what I saw in that house for 2 years was pure abuse. I don't need to be Grace's friend to know that what those 2 did to her was criminal." The prosecutor then called the officer who had supervised the eviction. He described the scene, Tiffany's violent reaction in breaking the dishes, the threats, and the erratic behavior. "In my 20 years of service, I've seen many cases of domestic violence. This is one of the worst I've witnessed in terms of psychological manipulation and systematic financial abuse." The judge listened to everything with an increasingly serious expression. Finally, it was my turn. Andrew accompanied me to the stand. I was sworn in, and the prosecutor started with gentle questions. "Ms. Holloway, can you describe what your life was like before Damon and Tiffany moved in with you?" I took a deep breath. "It was quiet, peaceful. I visited friends. I went to church on Sundays. I cooked what I wanted. I watched my favorite shows. It was my house. My sanctuary." My voice broke. After they arrived, it became a hell I couldn't escape. "Why didn't you leave? Why didn't you ask for help sooner?" the prosecutor asked. The question everyone asks. "Because I was afraid," I answered with raw honesty. "Afraid they would hurt me more. Afraid no one would believe me. Afraid of losing my only son. Afraid of dying alone. They used that fear as a weapon. Tiffany told me that if I reported them, Damon would testify that I was senile, that I made things up, and that they would put me in a nursing home. Damon said if I called the police, he knew people who would harm me. And when I tried to set boundaries, when I tried to say no, they hit me. I pointed to Tiffany. She hit me first, a slap so hard it knocked me to the floor, and Damon... I looked at my son, who still had his eyes fixed on the floor. My own son held me down so she could keep hitting me. He told me to shut up and obey, or it would be worse. Tears streamed freely down my face. I stopped being a person. I became a thing they used. The public defender attempted a cross-examination, but it was weak. Ms. Holloway, isn't it true that you invited my client and his wife to live with you? It wasn't an involuntary decision. I nodded. Yes, I invited them because they were family, because I thought they needed temporary help. I never imagined they would stay for 2 years, robbing and abusing me. The lawyer consulted his notes nervously. And isn't it true that you have a considerable pension? Couldn't you support them? The prosecutor immediately stood up. Objection, Your Honor. The victim's economic capacity does not justify theft or abuse. The judge nodded. Sustained. Counselor, change your line of questioning. The lawyer tried again. Ms. Holloway, my client claims that there were misunderstandings, that normal family arguments were misinterpreted as abuse. I looked him directly in the eye. Young man, I'm 65 years old. I was married for 42 years. I know the difference between an argument and a beating. I know the difference between a disagreement and being called a useless dog every day. I know the difference between helping family and being systematically robbed. My voice grew stronger. I didn't misinterpret anything. I lived through hell for 2 years, and I have the scars to prove it. The judge instructed the lawyer to sit down. Enough. I have heard enough. He turned to Damon and Tiffany. Mr. Holloway, Ms. Montero, do you have anything to say before I make my decision? The lawyer whispered something to Damon, who finally looked up. He stood with his handcuffs jingling. Mom. His voice sounded broken. I'm sorry. I really am sorry. I know there's no excuse for what I did. I was lost. Tiffany and I had problems and I... The judge interrupted him. You are not speaking to your mother. You are speaking to me. And I don't want to hear excuses. I want to know if you accept full responsibility for your actions. Damon swallowed. Yes, Your Honor. I accept that I treated my mother badly, that I took her money without permission, and that I didn't protect her when I should have. Tiffany elbowed him hard. Don't say anything else, she hissed. The judge struck the gavel. Ms. Montero, do you have anything to add? Tiffany stood up with her chin held high, defiant to the end. This whole thing is a ridiculous exaggeration. That woman hates us because we're young, and she's jealous. She's getting revenge. The judge raised his hand. Enough. Sit down. He picked up his notes and began reading his decision. I have reviewed all the evidence presented, $47,000 in documented fraud, multiple instances of physical violence with medical photographs as proof, audio recordings demonstrating sustained verbal and psychological abuse, testimony from eyewitnesses, violation of a restraining order with additional threats, and most concerning, a total lack of remorse on the part of Ms. Montero. He looked at Tiffany with clear disgust. Your defiant attitude in this chamber tells me you have learned nothing, that if you were released, you would pose a continuous danger to the victim. As for Mr. Holloway, the judge looked at Damon, you betrayed the most sacred bond that exists, the bond between mother and son. You not only allowed your wife to abuse your mother, but you actively participated. You hit her, threatened her, stole from her, and when she finally had the courage to defend herself, you tried to intimidate her into becoming a victim again. His voice grew harder. This court takes crimes against the elderly very seriously. They are one of the most vulnerable populations and deserve special protection under the law. The judge struck his gavel. Bail is denied for both defendants. You will remain in custody until trial. Furthermore, I extend the restraining order to absolute zero contact. You may not call, write, send messages through intermediaries, or approach Ms. Grace Holloway by any means. Any attempt will result in additional charges. Tiffany screamed, "This is unfair! You can't lock us up without bail!" The judge ignored her. "Trial date set for 3 months from now. Take them away." The officers approached Damon and Tiffany. As they were being led out, Tiffany screamed obscenities at me. "You miserable old woman! You're going to regret this. When we get out, you'll pay for this." The officers dragged her out of the chamber. Damon looked at me one last time. His eyes were full of tears. "I'm sorry, Mom," he murmured before he was taken away. I didn't respond. I had nothing more to say to him. When the room emptied, I collapsed into Elias's arms. Estelle hugged me from the other side. Andrew smiled with professional satisfaction. "Grace, that judge is known for being tough on crimes against the elderly. You did an excellent job on the stand. Your testimony was powerful." The prosecutor approached and shook my hand. "Ms. Holloway, I want you to know that I will prosecute this case with the full force of my office. Your courage in reporting this will help other victims do the same." The following months were a slow recovery. I replaced the living room furniture, the pieces that Tiffany had stained with her parties. I painted the walls a soft peach color, a warm tone Robert always wanted, but we never got around to doing. I hired a young woman named Amalia to help me with the deep cleaning once a week, but this time I was the boss. I set the rules, and I made the decisions. Estelle and I resumed our Thursday coffees. I went back to church on Sundays. Slowly, my house felt like home again. The trial arrived 3 months later. It lasted 2 weeks. The prosecutor presented overwhelming evidence. She brought in elder abuse experts who explained the patterns of manipulation and control, doctors who testified about my injuries, and financial auditors who traced every stolen dollar. The defense attorney did what he could, but there was no real defense against such thoroughly documented facts. Tiffany remained defiant to the end, insisting she was the victim. Damon testified in his own defense, admitting partial guilt but trying to place most of the blame on Tiffany. She pressured me. She wanted more and more. I was trapped. But the audio recordings proved he was an equal participant, his voice threatening me, his hands hitting me. He couldn't hide behind his wife. The verdict came after only 4 hours of jury deliberation, guilty on all counts. Tiffany received 10 years in prison with no possibility of parole until she served 7. Damon received 8 years with the possibility of parole after 5 if he demonstrated genuine rehabilitation. Furthermore, they were ordered to pay full restitution, $47,000 plus interest and punitive damages. Their future wages would be garnished until every cent was repaid. When the verdict was read, Tiffany screamed and cursed. They had to drag her out of the chamber by force. Damon only cried in silence. He looked at me one last time before they took him away. Maybe he was looking for forgiveness in my eyes, but all he found was peace. The peace of someone who had finally closed a painful chapter. 6 months after that day, I am sitting on my porch, drinking chamomile tea. The garden Robert planted has bloomed again. The pink roses he loved are more beautiful than ever. Estelle walks down the sidewalk with a basket of freshly baked bread. "Good morning, Grace," she says with that warm smile I cherish so much. We sit together to enjoy the morning sun. I ran into Tiffany at the grocery store yesterday. She had been released on parole after an appeal reduced her sentence to 5 years. She was pale, thin, and wearing simple, worn clothes. She was working, restocking products on the shelves. When she saw me, she froze. For a moment, I thought she would say something, try to confront me, but she just lowered her head and kept working. I continued on my way without looking back. She no longer has power over me. My house is mine again. My life is mine again. I'm 70 years old now. I started painting classes at the community center. I made new friends. I go for a walk every morning. I eat what I want when I want. I sleep without fear. My phone only receives calls from people who truly care about me. And when I close my eyes at night, instead of nightmares, I dream of Robert, of the good times, and of the peaceful future I finally have. I survived. And I didn't just survive, I flourished again. I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.